and welcome to another Bodgit and Leggit video. Now we've kind of got a viewer's request. He asked me a good while ago now if I could do kind of simple, well, let's start off beginners multimeters, what to buy, or a few simple tests you can do on the car. I have what I use behind me, so I'll go through them. But as regards multimeters, the problem is it's a minefield out there. There is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds to choose from, and the price difference on some of them are just out of this world. So it really does depend your money situation. But personally, me, I would not go for the cheaper ones. I'll show you why in this video. Why I don't like them, but it's entirely up to yourself. I show you the, I have a few here, as you can see. Now, I do use kind of all of them. They all do have slightly different functions. So I'll show you the functions I like, and you know, some of the functions that might suit you as well. If you are looking for one, rather than going for a cheap one, what I would say for you to do, fair enough, you might not be able to spend 500, 600, 700 quid on a brand new one, but maybe go down the second-hand route. You can look on all the, all the websites for second-hand ones where you can pick up some really good deals, because obviously you might not be using them every day, and you don't want to spend a fortune, which is understandable. But the more money you do kind of spend, the more features you get, and the kind of the better quality. There's just, you do get what you pay for. Now, there is certain ones that are out there you may be paying more so for the name, but you do 99% of the time, or say 9, yeah, you do kind of get what you pay for. It's like anything. So I'm going to go through the ones I've got, and yeah, we'll do a few tests. Now, I just put in this here because technically it is a multimeter, even though it is kind of my scan tool, but it is a multimeter as well. But to strike this up every single time to do a few tests really isn't worth the hassle. Next, we've got a 2-channel oscilloscope with a multimeter, and that's the make and number there. Again, very handy. Then we have a FACOM multimeter with an amp clamp, because I think you definitely do need an amp clamp. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can buy a multimeter and have an amp clamp like this that attaches to it, or you can have this one, which we'll get to in a second. Just zoom in on the make and model of this one. That's a FACOM one. Next, we have a snap-on amp clamp. So that's kind of, rather than having 2 separate units like that, something like this is just one unit. It is an amp clamp, but it's also a multimeter. Then we have another snap-on meter. This is a 2-channel oscilloscope. The beauty thing I like about this is it'll actually Bluetooth to my big snap-on machine. So you can, if you needed to hide this under, say, the bonnet somewhere and take it for a drive, if you don't have the extra long leads and stuff like that. So there's a few advantages with this. Or you can have this kind of sat on a bench, because what I want to do eventually is make like a diagnostic table, so I don't have to keep moving everything everywhere, and put this underneath and just have it Bluetooth, so I don't really have to move the big machine too much. Then we have, this is not really a multimeter, but it's something you might be interested in. I've shown this on another video, replacing a pollen filter, and with this can tell you how fast the air is blowing, so you can see how good your fans are working. It also has a temperature sensor in, which is another handy thing to have. This then, what's the make of that? We'll zoom into that. There we go. I don't know. We zoomed into the make of the snap-on one there, so there you go. There's the numbers on that. This is the cheap one I have just for showing you the difference between them. And then we have a Spice one here. It's just kind of handy. A quick test. That's a Terminator, that one. So there we go. For example, if I just want to do a really quick test to see, say, if a battery's charging or the voltage, I'll just quickly use this because it's really, really quick. Just press one button, bang. It's just easier. It just depends, the test I'm doing, what I'm doing, to kind of what one I would use. They all have, their own advantages. For example, I'll just pick up this one. This one has a really nice battery test feature on it. I'll go through that, use different leads, and it has a battery test feature. So, you know, this also has a temperature probe, which I think is good. So what I personally look for in a meter, and what I think you should look for, is a meter with a min-max scale. I think a min-max scale is really important. I'll show you why. We can do a quick kind of battery test on a min-max scale. Really are handy. The problem is, it's, you know, I can just keep going on and on about all the duty cycles and everything they can do, but we'll just kind of try and keep it to kind of a simple meter. What I think you should have is definitely, like I said, a min-max scale. Next, you want some sort of continuity test. Now, even the really cheap ones have continuity, but I don't like them. So min-max, continuity, and if you can, a temperature gauge, because you'd be surprised how much you do actually use it. You know, the temperature can be really handy depending on what you happen to be doing in the car. So yeah, that's what I personally like to go for. All my multimeters have min and max scales. I think the min and max scales is really a key. The temperature, not really. I mean, you can buy separate, like that one down there, the one with the fan on. That is just, that does temperatures. You can buy a separate one. You don't need one built in. It's just if you want handiness all in one unit, you know, you don't have to take everything out with you and all that, you know, especially if you're if you're kind of a mobile guy, you don't want to be bringing all this stuff with you because you're just piling up, you know, more crap with you. Another thing you definitely want is an amp clamp. Now, these are both the same make, but that doesn't really matter. They're both Facom, but you don't need to buy, if you've got whatever make you got, you don't need to buy the same make amp clamp to fit your multimeter. Just make sure you have the right connections on. But yeah, these two go together. Amp clamp's really, really important because you don't just want to do, you know, voltage. You need currents. You need everything. So an amp clamp, definitely you want to look into buying an amp clamp. You can buy like a multimeter first and then buy an amp clamp second, you know. But as you can see, this is 2 bits. And some people don't like that. If you want like a neater package, you can go on to something like this, which is an amp clamp, but it's also a multimeter. So you can flick between the two. So rather than getting an amp clamp out, you know, this is just kind of neater and handier. Again, I do use them both, but you know, if I'm quickly going somewhere, if someone's broken down the road or something like that, you know, and you know, it's a batch or something, I would take this because I only have to take one thing. So it just depends what you really want to use. But again, this one, as you can see, has a temperature probe here, also has a min and max scale, and it does, you know, continuity, it does kind of everything, does hertz and all that. If you do kind of go for a more expensive one, providing you look after it, it should last you a long time. You know, so there is advantages of going with something like this. I'm not saying you have to go for any kind of these ones. You know, I've shown this in one of my videos, and someone commented that they've seen a similar one, a copied version of this, and it was really, really cheap. But in my opinion, the copy ones, they're crap. If you watch people on YouTube, some of the electronic guys, they actually do crack these open and they crack the copy version. And the difference inside, they look the same, different color, but the actual quality of the switch, the quality of everything is completely and utterly different. So I personally wouldn't go down the cheap route, because in the long run, it's not going to do you any good. It might not come through on camera, but when you just press this button is solid. You know, everything is solid. There's a nice click to it. It's just a proper unit. When you look at something like this, I mean, I can push the button in. I don't know if you can see that. I can push the button in. Sometimes see, there's a brand new battery in here. There we go. It turned on eventually. You know, they're no good. The leads with this are really hard and crap. This is the lead that comes with it. It's really hard. It doesn't like bend properly. It's just naff. It really is. And when they're too hard, they'll snap internally, and then you might think your meter's gone, or it could be your leads, and your leads can be reading. I'll show you. I did do a test ages ago. I put good quality leads on that meter, and it read different to these leads, and it's just they're crap. It's as simple as that. When you look at the likes of, this is the snap-on lead. The wire is so much more flexible, and it feels so much nicer. It's just better. It's just better. The other good thing about the snap-on I have in my hand, for example, is you can get different attachments for it. So I can screw this off, and you can see we've got a point there. This is actually, if I slide that down, is an actual alligator clip. So an alligator clip is really handy. Just having the points on your meter is no good, because there is times you just want to quickly put this on an earth or a power and hold the other wire on swing. So having different ends and different attachments to them is key. Just having the ones with the points in, they're no good, because you always need an extra hand. So yeah, cheap ones, it's the best thing to do. It really is. So yeah, cheap ones, honestly, just stay away. Buy a second-hand one. Buy a good quality second-hand one. You'll still save yourself a fortune, and it'll be there. But a good tip is, if you don't use them a lot, take the batteries out. Don't leave them somewhere with the batteries in, because the batteries can leak, and all the acid can go in, it'll destroy them. So if it's something you don't use every day, you don't maybe use for a couple of months, just take the batteries out. I know you might say, well, there's a cheap one and it's 30 quid, and I only use it once every 6 months. But the readings it can give you can throw you off. I will show you something when we get into this video, just what difference between 2 meters read is unbelievable. And if you're looking for something minute, it could be throwing you off big time. Especially if you're doing voltage drops, or if you're, you want to do an earth circuit, and it's reading high. You think, well, that shouldn't be reading that high. Is it back feeding from somewhere? Is it is there a short? Is there a open? What? It can really, really throw you off. Where the better quality meters would do just better. Now, if you've got a little bit more money to spend, what you can do is you can buy like a graphing meter, or this is a 2-channel oscilloscope as well as a meter. I have done a video with this, not on kind of showing it, but I did a relative compression test, very simple, with the low amp probe, and you can do it with this. It's just, we'll just turn that on. So there's the multimeter, and we can go to the actual scope, and you can do some really great things with it. Now, the screen is a bit small, so the bigger screen, obviously, the better it is, because you can see everything clearer. If you're trying to get a secondary waveform on this for the ignition, it is going to be quite difficult to see absolutely everything about it. I'm not 100% up on secondary waveforms. I know enough, but you could always learn more. Everyone could always be learning more. But yeah, something like this is really handy, because you have a really good multimeter, but you also have a scope. I can Bluetooth it to the big fella, and so there's loads of advantages. If you've got a few more quid, you can maybe look into buying something along them lines. You don't have to go for this. We have this one here, which is a multimeter, a lot bigger screen. So you're looking at that, there's a nice big screen, easy to see, clear. The other good thing about this, if you're unsure, it'll actually tell you where to put the probes. So if you don't know where to put the probes, and then we can go onto the multimeter, onto the actual scope there. So, it's whatever you really want. And unfortunately, the more money you spend, the more things it can do, and it's just as kind of as simple as that. But like I said, there is other options out there. Second-hand one, nothing wrong with second-hand parts. And you can get a really, really good deal. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to do a few simple tests. So hopefully I've kind of explained, I don't want to go into big detail with these, because this is not what this video is about. It's just showing you kind of what I use, the features I like, and we're going to do some really simple, quick tests just to show you, if you want to do, well, some simple, quick tests. Simple. Sorted! One thing I did forget to say, you can see I'm just editing the video there, is on the cheaper ones, especially with the modern cars with all the fancy electronics and fancy computers, if they decide to do something funny and send power back or do something, you can damage your car. The more expensive ones tend to have a lot more protection built in to actually stop that. They're designed to be working on the newer vehicles. Something to bear in mind, because if you test something and it goes bang because your meter has done something internally, you're going to be placing some very expensive parts on your car, or even worse, some very expensive parts on someone else's car. So bear that in mind. Right, I've just picked two out of them just to give you a kind of an example what I mean. All I'm going to do is test this battery, AA battery. I'm going to test them on both machines and see what we get. So we'll do it on the cheap one first. I've just got it set on a 2-volt range because this one's automatic, this one isn't. So this is not going to be over 2 volts, so I'm just going to set it on a 2-volt range. Oh, if I don't keep slipping off, I will. And we've got... No, it's not doing anything. You see, even that, you see what I had to do there? I had to twist. This is what I mean. This is why I just don't like cheap shit. Oh, going all over the shop now. 15.96, that's what that's reading at. Now, just use the one next to it. Same thing, just put the probes on. You can see that one there. We'll move away. 16.7, and there was a big difference there. Especially now, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing some like real serious voltage work, you know, then that is a huge amount. But as you can see the difference, it's just, yeah, it's just a huge amount. You can see why I had to flick that back because it wasn't working. It's just the leads are naff. It's just naff. So that's why I don't like the cheaper tools. I mean, even sometimes expensive tools, to rely on them, you know, is not necessarily, and you're always kind of second guessing everything because you think, oh, is that right? Is that reading it right? And all that, you know. So what I will do for the hell of it, I'm just going to take these leads off. So what was that, 15.9 something? And if I put these leads on it, all I've done is just put different leads on it. It's on the same setting, just with a lot better quality leads. What do we get now? 15.96, and I think got 15.95. Is that all 97? So, you know, there is a difference. Better quality leads, anyway, just don't buy cheap meter. Just don't do it. So I'm not going to go through every one of these meters because that's just pointless. I'll just show you why I like the min-max setting, where a temperature sensor can come in handy. Now I'm just going to use this one just because it's, well, just because I've got it really. Like I said, you can put a temperature sensor in there. I'm just going to use this one to show you where a temperature sensor can come in handy. Like I said, this, for example, if I want to really if I want to really test something really quickly, just to make sure, you know, there is 12 volts there or a battery is charging, I'd quickly just whip out this just because it's fast. Where I wouldn't necessarily go, you know, take this out of the bag and all that. Well, that's another thing. When you get better quality stuff, you do tend to get better bags that they stay in, better protected and all that. So yeah. And you can see this is the smallest screen, well obviously apart from that one, but that's a slightly different meter. But when you compare it to kind of the screen on there, there's a big difference in size. We will show where like an amp clamp can come in handy. So again, I won't show you this one, but it'll be exactly the same. It just means I have to plug this into it. So I'll just show you a couple of tests on that. This is what I was hoping he wants anyway. So if he does watch this video and I do miss something, just comment down below and I'll see what I can do. But I was getting from his question, he just wanted kind of simple tests to do. So we'll just use these two. I'm not going to use that. So we'll get a motor in and we'll just do a couple of simple tests and call it a video. Sorted. Just something else you want to consider. And yes, I did put these on the wrong way, but I have now got them the right way. So yeah, I was going to get some comments about that. I noticed as I was doing it. Another thing you want to take into consideration is batteries. This one does take quite a lot of batteries. It takes 6 AA's. This one takes the 9-volt jobby, and the cheap one takes the 9-volt jobby as well. What I have noticed with other people that have kind of cheaper meters, the batteries, they really burn through the batteries quite quickly. And the big Snap-on one I had, that has got a battery pack in it. So it is something to bear in mind, because I've got rechargeable batteries in this. If you have to, don't get me wrong, they do last a long time, but you know, you just take into consideration what sort of batteries it has. Does it have a battery pack? Can you charge it? Do you have to replace the batteries? Because that can come into it too, because replacing batteries isn't cheap. And even getting the rechargeable ones, they're not cheap. So it's another thing to take into consideration. And again, don't use the cheaper batteries because they're no good either. I've seen the cheaper ones, from the ones that I've seen, tend to allow the batteries to drain more, but then they start having really screwy readings, where the more expensive ones tend to, once the batteries, they just cut off. And they do warn you quicker that the batteries are going down, but rather than trying to keep going, they just cut off. This kind of tries to keep going, which is the worst thing, because then you will not get proper readings. So that's something to bear in mind too, and that is very important. It's one of them, you know, key things. Bear that in mind as well. Right, just to give you an idea on this one, on the Facon one, what the temperature probe looks like. To be fair, the temperature probes, they look all more or less the same. It's just this one goes in at the top, and on the Snap-on one it goes in here. But they look more or less identical. And with the Facon one, you get these leads here. This is what we're going to use to do the ohms test on the battery. You get a special set of leads, really good. So, but essentially what you got to do is, these are the special leads you get with the meter, and as you can see, it uses all 4 connections on top. And this is where you need to know the spec of your battery to kind of make this test seem, well, so you can actually understand the test, should I say. So I'll just quickly put it on this battery. It's not going to be the test, but you're going to get the idea. So what you was to do is, the battery's on, it knows you're in a special mode on the actual machine. Start the test, and it gives you your mega ohm readings. Now you need to know your battery and all that sort of stuff to know, you know, good or bad or indifferent. But I was hoping, the way that other battery was gone, I was just hoping I'd be able to see like a really, really good one against a really, really bad one, but it just hasn't gone like that way. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do a few simple tests on a battery, and on just doing a few simple things, and hopefully that's what he was looking for, who asked me to do the video. And like I said, I do apologise, I can't remember your name. Now, if you remember what I was saying before about the connections, if you're testing something and you need 2 hands to hold the connections in place, but then if you need to change the meter or put it in a different place, you can't really do it. Your hands are tied up. So with the better meters, you do get other connections you can put on. Now, don't get me wrong, you can actually buy a new complete connection kit. You don't have to buy, you know, the top of the range meter just to get decent leads. You can buy separate leads altogether. But if you don't have, if you see a meter online and it's really cheap, it doesn't have the leads, don't worry about it. You can always buy leads off something else. So what we're going to do is just going to put it on volts. So the beauty of the leads is I can just click them on. I can be doing other things here. I don't have to be holding them. And as you can see, we've got 12.6 volts. Now, You can't really test a condition of a battery really as regards, you can't go off the voltage, as I say. A battery can read good voltage, but it doesn't mean it's any good. So don't just go off the voltage. I will do a separate video on how to actually test batteries, because there is other ways of doing it, other machines you can use. But don't go off, just because you've got over 12 volts in your battery doesn't mean the battery's any good. The cranking amps internally in the battery could be low, but the voltage could be okay. So don't go off that. And if you are checking how the voltage of your battery, let's say let's say you need to jump start your car because the battery was flat, you left something on, or you think maybe your battery was dead. You jump start it and you leave the car running for half an hour, you turn it off. Don't check the battery straight away because it will have some sort of surface charge on it. You need to really let it settle for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, it just depends. Let it settle and then test it, because if you test it straight away, again, you can get good voltage when not necessarily there is good voltage. What I am going to do is I'm not going to use this meter for now for the minute because the screen is too small. So I'm going to get a bigger meter, but what I will use, and just to show you as regards the amp clamp setting, so the actual, this part, and why you actually need an amp clamp as well as a meter, or something with them both in like this. So this is why you really need an amp clamp as well. I've just put the amp clamp around the positive lead of the battery. I've just opened my door so my lights are on. If you want to test for a draw, or if you're testing some sort of component in your car and you want to make sure it is getting the right amperage, well, you need an amp clamp, because you can't always necessarily go off voltage. Sometimes, depending on what you're testing, depending on what you're testing, you might need both. You might need volts and amps. It just depends what you're testing. So an amp clamp is really good. So at the minute, what I'm going to do is I'll get you closer. I'll turn the camera upside down. Is that going to work? So when you look at this back, will you look at this right? I think so. We'll soon find out. As you can see, we've got 2.4, 2.6 amps flowing through that lead, and that's just with my dome lights on and the lights under the mirrors and stuff. So that's where an amp clamp is vital, really, because without an amp clamp you can't tell the actual current flowing or anything like that, really. So you can just see, you maybe can't, but it's just down there. So, that's where an amp clamp will come in handy, and especially when you're testing other things. If you're testing fuel pumps and you need to know the amperage, what it's drawing or anything like that, because it might not be drawing it properly, or, the fuel pump could be dodgy, this is where an amp clamp comes in. And obviously, you can do an awful lot more, but this just gives you an idea of what you can do. Right, so I'm going to use this one for the video because I think it's just easier the way it lights up and stuff. So what I've done, we'll just turn it off for a second, turn it back on. So this is just the normal, it's on auto at the minute, so whatever I put on, it will automatically detect and it will take up the range for me. So it means I don't have to keep going to the range if it's, voltage or millivolts or anything like that. So we'll do the same thing. I just put it on the battery. Right, and as you can see, because I've had the lights on, there's a bit of a draw. Obviously the battery voltage is going down. But what I like about this particular one is when I press min-max, it brings the min-max value underneath. Some of them you have to press it and you have to do a record, and then you can go back on the main numbers and it will flick between the min-max. This one shows me a live reading and the min-max at the same time, which is what I like. Some of the other multimeters don't, but as long as you've got the function, you're okay. And the reason why it's really handy for is I'm just going to show you a quick test on a battery. So if I just leave that here, hopefully, can you see that? Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to start this, and obviously once I start and everything takes a big draw, it's going to go down to what the minimum was, and then it's going to flip up to what the maximum was. So let me start this vehicle now. Right, so as we can see, it actually went down to 9.3 volts on the initial crank. And then obviously once it got charging, it actually went up to 14.7. And the reason that is really good is because now we can do like a simple test to see if our battery is actually any good. Keep getting distracted and I can't remember what I was at. So basically this is just a quick load test. You do want to make sure your battery is below or is above 12.4 volts. I think it's 12.6, 12.7 volts is a fully charged battery. You want to be kind of close to that. Even though it's 12 volts, even if it says 12.1, the battery isn't fully charged. And a 12 volt battery, if it was just at 12 volts, the chances of it starting your car is pretty slim. So we need to make sure it does that. This is why a min-max function, well, this is one of the reasons you can use a min-max function on your multimeter. And as you can see, what we did do is we started it, and then we got 9.38 volts. That was the lowest the battery went to, and then it, obviously once it started charging, it did go back up to 14.7. Right, and really what you're looking for is, if it's below 9.6, the battery really isn't great. Now my battery is only 9.3, so this battery is not great. And I know it's not great because sometimes it does let me down. I do need to change it. But this is just a quick way of it. This doesn't test your cranking amps or anything like this, but with a min-max, you know, you can get a rough idea, and that's a really quick way, because what a lot of people do is they just go off the voltage once the car is running. Oh well, it's on 13, 14 volts. Depending where you are in the world, that will differ. If you're in a really cold place, the alternator and the battery needs to work harder to keep the voltage up, so that can go higher. Or if you're in a really, really hot country, it might be slightly lower. So that does depend on where you are in the world. But our initial phase charge, you could say, so our initial charge or our service charge at the minute, oh yeah, that's it, drop that, that's all we need to do, is 12.5. Now my lights are still on inside, and you know I've been messing around with it, so that's why it's kind of dropped to that. So that's one quick test you can do with a min-max scale. Now we'll get into doing some of the basic tests, and hopefully that helps them, and then maybe we can do kind of a bit more advanced stuff in another video. So another quick test we'll do is to make sure our car is charging properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it. And what I want to do is put all the lights on, so put the full beams on, the low beams, put the radio on, put everything you can possibly turn on in your car, turn everything on, and that's the reading we're looking for. We're not interested, if everything's turned off, it could be reading 13.5 volts or 14, you might think, oh, that's great. But once you start putting the alternator under load and start turning stuff on, that's when you can be having an issue. So that's what we're going to do now. We'll just start this, turn everything on, and see what it looks like. I don't like that meter just resting there. Now hopefully you can hear me. We can reset the min-max for the minute. Actually, we're not worried about the min-max. So we've got 14.5 volts. My battery was a little bit low, so it is putting a slight charge on it. I've got my lights turned on, and we're still reading over 14 volts. This is a Ford, and they do kind of, in Ireland, with the weather we have, that is a perfectly good reading. They do kind of go up to, I think even some Fords can go up to 15 volts in this kind of climate, and you're okay. But an older car might go up to 13.5 volts with everything turned on. But it is important to turn everything on, otherwise this test is kind of a waste of time. So that's what you're looking for. It's another quick little test you can do. And as you can see, that's what I meant about the surface charge. You can see that was actually, when I turned it off, it was at 13 volts. So don't test it straight away, because you'll be getting completely false readings. You can see that dropping now, which is what it should do. So don't just test the battery just after you've charged or anything like that. Give it time to kind of settle before you test it. Right, so if we're testing things like lights and stuff, obviously we know Well, if you're testing other circuits, what you need to know is what voltage should be on. So obviously when we're testing a light bulb, we know there should be 12 volts there. If you're testing a sensor, depending on the sensor, there might be a 5-volt reference on the sensor, so you're looking for a 5 volt. I'm not going to go into all that, I'm just giving you ideas. That's for another video. So if we're testing, let's say we happen to be testing a sensor and there should be a 5-volt signal on it, well then obviously we're looking for 5 volts. If we get more or less, we have a problem. Again, on your headlights are 12 volts. So if you're only getting 10 volts, well then it's not enough, and you could have issues somewhere else. What other quick tests can we quickly do? I know I'm going to miss out on a few. I'm just trying to get you kind of used to, you know, a multimeter rather than not going into too much detail at the minute. Last test we'll do, just a quick simple test. We'll do a voltage drop test, and I think that'd be enough. And if you want maybe more kind of in-depth videos on this, we can give them as a bell. But as I'm doing diagnostic videos, you'll kind of see, you know, how we do it and what we do anyway. But yeah, so we'll do a voltage drop test now, and I think that should be good enough for the video. Right, so we're going to do a simple voltage drop test. So we're going to do it on the power side of the battery. So I've got it connected to my battery, and I've also got it connected to my starter motor. So essentially on the solenoid, that the wire you're going to, or the wire I'm coming from. So from the battery to the solenoid. And we're going to do, again, I'm going to use the min and max function. I'm just going to set this to volts rather than millivolts. So we've got volts. And what we're looking for is, again, because we have to test this under load, because we're testing a loaded part, so we're going to have to start this. And we really don't want to see any more than half a volt of a voltage drop. If we see more than half a volt of a voltage drop, we've got a problem with the wire. So what this test is really good for is, just because your car doesn't start, doesn't mean it's not your starter motor. Your starter motor might turn, but it just might not be turning fast enough. And people might think, oh, I've got a lazy starter motor, it's my starter motor. They spend a couple of £100, put a new starter motor on, same problem, where it's most probably the wire. I'm not saying it is, but this is a way to test it. Whenever I call a starter motor or an alternator, I I do a few tests before, and this is one of them I would do for a starter motor. So we have it on min-max, we're on voltage, we have our lead set up, so I'm just going to crank the engine and see what we get. Press the wrong button. I was on the wrong scale. Also, I forgot to mention a graphene meter as well. A graphene multimeter is kind of handy. This is a graphene multimeter as well, but we're not using that, but it is. So I should have really said that at the beginning of the video. Anyway. So what we're doing, we don't want to see any more than half a volt. I'm going to leave it on auto now for the minute. I'm just going to put it on min-max, and we're going to see, leave it on voltage. Right, as we can see, we're 0.1 of a volt. So that's absolutely fine. I just turned the car off. I had it on the wrong scale. That's why you can just leave it on auto, but when you leave it on auto, you might start reading millivolts, and that's another thing you want to be careful of. I'll do the test again on millivolts, just so you have to be looking at this V here, making sure you're on volts or millivolts. But as you can see, we are absolutely fine. So if you're having a problem with your car starting, that's a good test to do. Let's just redo this. Oh, turn it off. Let's redo this again. I'm going to leave it on millivolts or on auto, so this will automatically detect, and just look at the difference in numbers. So as you can see, we've got a lot bigger numbers coming up. So I just turn it off. And as you can see, you know, you might think, well, that's 15.1 volts if you quickly look at that, but it isn't. For a start, there's a minus there, and not only that, it's millivolts. So be very careful when you're looking at a multimeter, you have it on the right setting, or you're not misinterpreting the information. Because if you quickly looked at that, you could say, oh, I'm down 15 volts or 13 volts, or oh, it's definitely a problem, but it's not. It's just you've misread the actual meter. So just be careful. You can see it says MV, which is millivolts. So it's 150 millivolts, not 15 volts, or you know, you might even quickly look at it and read something else into it. I don't know. You might, oh, 1.9 volts. I don't know. However you quickly look at it, you might just kind of get something wrong. So that's a quick voltage test on the power side. Another thing I did forget to mention, if you've got your power cable going to your starter motor, for example, depending on what car you're in, there might be a junction box somewhere. There could be, you know, where the cables actually join. So you want to test it at that junction box, and then if you test it at the junction box and you're reading perfect, and then you test it from the junction box to the start, then you know it's just that little piece of wire from the junction box to the starter, or wherever the join happens to be. So that's something to bear in mind. Don't just, again, you need to make sure if you've got a solid cable or one with a couple of connections in. But it is very, very straightforward and very, very simple. And you do need to know these things. Just like Ohm's law, if you're doing anything with multimeters and stuff, and especially with cars, you need to have basic understanding. So what is Ohm's law? And, you know, just research it, look at videos and stuff like that, because you will need to know it, because otherwise if you don't, you're going to just screw yourself up big time. I did a video on a Volkswagen. We had a problem with the back light, and they went to a couple of other garages and they kept putting bulbs in because they were testing the circuit when there was under no load, and as soon as I put the bulb in, the voltage dropped, and that's what I showed in that video. I'll link that video down below as well, but that's these little things you do need to know before you do something, because if you don't test the loaded circuit with the loads, you're going to screw yourself up big time. So like I said, what I'd do is I'll link the other video on we had the problem with the bulb not working on the back. No point me showing this video. There's another video there, and it really does explain it very well, because you can see the before and after of the fix, which is obviously good. I was going to do a quick show with this as well, but again, I've done a video on that, so I'll link that down below as well. Again, you can see the before and after of why you might need something, you know, kind of like, well, fair enough, kind of like the actual the fan, but the temperature sensor. You'll get the idea anyway in the other video. And as regards finding a bad earth, again, you can do a very simple test through the multimeter. Leave one of the probes on the plus of the battery. If I put this on the other side, get a reading, so it's 12.5 volts that's in that battery at the minute, or 12.55. So write that down, and what you can do is you can touch, if you was to touch another earth somewhere, so for example, I'm just going to touch the actual engine, but let's say you was having problems at starting, you've tested the power wire and stuff, and everything kind of seems fine, so you might have a problem with the earth side of things. Well, if you touch where the earth cable goes into the car and it goes onto the chassis, I can't do it because I just can't be asked to get down there. Let's say you did that, and as you can see, we've got the same reading. But let's say, for example, you didn't. So let's say you had a really bad reading. So if I come over here, I'll put this on a stud which has got paint on it, so it's not really making a proper connection. As you can see, we're only 9 volts. So if you was to test an earth wire, and you had 12.5 volts at the battery, but you only had, like, say, 10 volts there, you know you've got a problem with that length of wire. Again, there's a few earth straps on the engine, so you can test all them, but obviously go to the battery one first, and if there's any joins in it, test the joins, and then you can kind of see very quickly. If you was to go to one joint, as you can see, that says like 7 volts, then the next joint you went to was good and you was reading 12.5 volts again, you know it's that little section there which is bad. You replace it and you should be fine. So yes, a multimeter obviously does come in really handy. And that's the functions or the features I like. You can then start getting into other features like continuity. I should have really done a continuity test. I'll quickly do it now. Essentially, it's to test if the wire you're working on is good. Again, you can't always go off a continuity test, but it gives you an idea. So let's say I'm working on a wire here on this sensor, and it's going from the sensor. Let's say it goes to an earth or something. So you put one of your connections on the sensor, and then you find where the other wire goes to, and as you hit it off, it should beep. If it doesn't beep, so you put it on the wire, let's say, oh, I need to find there's not an earth. You put it on the wire and it doesn't beep, you know there's a break somewhere in that wire. And again, what you can do is, if you've got any connections, you can go further up on the connection and you can touch it. But this should beep because I've got it on an earth. So anywhere the car is earthed, there's no earth there. There's an earth there. So that's a continuity test. Again, that's another quick, simple test that can come in handy very, very quickly. You can even do it the same way, rather than leaving this on the actual battery like I just did to do the other test. You can even do a continuity test. But yeah, then if you really want to start getting into multimeters, you can see they can do other things. They can do frequencies, they can do hertz, they can do cycles, so you can test, you know, all different types of sensors, ABS sensors, and all different types of sensors through a multimeter, providing it's got that function on. That's why if you do spend a bit more money, when you get used to a multimeter and when you start doing more, your multimeter is going to be able to carry on. You don't have to sell it and buy another one because you've outgrown your multimeter. So it's just, there's loads of things to look for, and I've obviously, you know, forgotten some things as well that I should have maybe put in this video, but hopefully that'll give you an understanding of, a basic understanding of essentially how a multimeter works, what sort of functions you might need. It all depends on what you're doing. And yeah, that's it. So hopefully that helps. The comments will tell me, no doubt. Yes, I forgot another simple test, an ohms test. So I just turn it on, as you can see, turn it on to ohms. It looks like, if you're unsure, like if you've ever seen an Omega watch, the symbol looks very similar to the ohms reading. Now, that is another great test. The problem is that you need the right information. So if you're testing, let's say, a coil pack or a coil, you need to know what the ohms is for that coil, because if you just put it on and it reads 2, 5, 100, whatever, if you don't know what it's supposed to be, well, then you're just, again, wasting your time. So that's where information is key. You can also test wires and other things with an ohm to make sure that it's actually everything, or the whole circuit is okay. It's not drawing too much. It's not open. It's not closed. And you can actually tell all that by an ohm reading. But again, Ohm's law, if you know Ohm's law, you can actually work a lot of that out yourself, especially when you're testing circuits and stuff like that. But anything like coil packs, or like I was testing a VVT valve on a BMW there a few weeks ago, you need to know what the actual ohm reading is before you do it. But ohm reading, another really handy quick test. Sorted! So yeah, look, hope that helps. We are going to be doing a lot more diagnostic videos. I was going to kind of stay away from doing them type of videos, but people want to see them, so I'll do them. So when you watch them videos, you'll see all the tests we kind of do. But if you want to see maybe separate videos on, you know, maybe doing a little bit more with multimeters, let me know. But any questions, anything like that, just go to our forum, sign up to our forum, ask them there. If you want me to do more videos on kind of this stuff, just stay down below in the comments and we'll see what we can do. But that's really it. You know, you do need a basic understanding. Buy the best multimeter you can afford, because, you know, even if you don't use it a lot, there will be a time where you do need it and you've got it. So, you know, second hand is no problem. You don't have to buy new, but just stay away from the cheap ones, because you'll have nothing but grief with them. You know, even stupid things like they don't shut off. And if you leave it on, you know, the battery will go down. So when you need it, you've got no battery. The good ones, some of the cheap ones do, but the good ones do turn off and all that. You know, it's just little stupid things like that which can, you know, save a lot of hassle, really. But that's my take on it. That's what I think. But like, I'm sure everyone else has their own opinion. But that's it. But most importantly, don't forget, get your hands dirty. See you for the next one.